invitation says the dress code is Gothic. I'm gonna have to dig pretty far into the back of the closet.
No, you won't. Give me 2 minutes. I got this.
Have fun? I'll see you when I'm dressed.
It's perfect, isn't it? In what universe is that Gothic? You're not even wearing black. I'll have you know this is a perfectly well-researched Gothic fitted dress. You're the one who's in the wrong outfit. That isn't even a dress you're wearing. Are you... I think you maybe understood the assignment a little too well. I swear I am not making this up. This style of dress, to avoid confusion with others, is often called the Gothic fitted dress. But what makes it Gothic? And why does it not look more, well, goth? Welcome to SnappyDragon. I'm the fashion historian and former, sometimes current, goth. Around this time of year, there's a general interest and celebration of the dark, spoopy, and otherworldly, and otherwise, well, gothic aspects of fashion. Whether it's as part of a Halloween costume, a costume for another occasion, or everyday fashion, Gothic style has remained an interest of mine even after I got older and lazier and started wearing colors sometimes. High school V might be a little disappointed, but I think she'd forgive me if she knew I still wear the trip pants. But back to this confusion. So many things in history have been described as goth or gothic, from modern day fashion and literature trends to 1970s gothic rock, to 18th and 19th century novels, to medieval architecture, to Germanic tribes invading the Western Roman Empire. How on earth does all of that have the same name? Good question. That's what we're here to figure out. I think the biggest draw, if you will, of Gothic fashion and aesthetics comes down to the drama, the outlandishness, the stark difference from the ordinary or mundane. It's not just about wearing all black. I'm wearing all black right now, and I just look cozy and monochrome. The clothes aren't just dark, they're full of historical influences and metal and leather details. The makeup isn't just vampy, it's full of abnormal looking touches, from black lipstick to intentionally unnatural foundation colors to super heavy performance or costume looks. And whether you're wearing intense makeup just for a costume or a gothic face is your everyday look, heavy makeup means it's super important to take care of your skin. I got the UFO 3 by 40 Sweden a few months ago, and I've really been enjoying incorporating it into my skincare routine, so thanks to 40 Sweden for sponsoring this video. The UFO 3 is a deep facial hydration device that gives the benefits of 5 spa facials. It increases skin moisture levels by 126% in a 2-minute treatment, so it's clinically proven to reduce the appearance of wrinkles in just 1 week, as well as creating a properly hydrated and healthy skin barrier that's less vulnerable to blemishes, inflammation, and sensitivity. It only takes 2 minutes to do a full treatment. That's more effective than a conventional sheet mask alone, something I always have trouble sitting still long enough to do. I've always been interested in skincare because I've had incredibly stubborn acne since I was that goth teenager. It's leveled out a little, but it's still a continual struggle, and I have to use some pretty strong prescription skincare to manage it. Said prescription skincare is effective, but it can be drying and irritating, so the UFO 3 can be really helpful for keeping my skin healthy and hydrated. Here's how it works. You take out the little ring here, put one of the UFO masks over the circle, and clip it in place with the ring. You can use it offline by clicking the universal button for 8 different treatment patterns, or you can use the phone app, select the mask you're using, and receive a specialized combination of light, temperature, and T-sonic pulsations designed to get the most out of your mask. This one's the Matte Maniac mask, which is great for oily skin and is formulated to promote acne healing. And light therapy can be used to treat acne itself, so I'm getting at my skin issues from all angles. The UFO 3 is rarely available with a discount, but if you want to try it, you can get 30% off the UFO 3 using the link in the description. The first people to use my coupon code V10, VI10, will get an additional 10% discount. Go take care of your beautiful faces. Is this thing gonna make it so I don't have to go through your whole involved skincare routine every morning? Who says I'm gonna let you use it? Hey! Fine, here. Keep yourself occupied, just don't break it. Back to the Goths. What do these Goths and these Goths have to do with each other? The answer comes partially from linguistics and will require me to pronounce a lot of words in languages I don't speak, so please do pardon any errors. I'm doing my best. The historical origin of the word Goth comes from a group of East Germanic tribes described from the 1st century CE by Greek and Roman writers. The English word Goth comes from the Latinized word Gothi, which comes from a Proto-Germanic word reconstructed as gutas. As well as being the name of a people, the word's meaning is uncertain. Everything from people, to progenitors, to stallions, to pouring, the last possibly referring to a connection to rivers. The geographer Ptolemy places them east of the Vistula River in present-day Poland, and Pliny the Elder and Tacitus mention them also as a subgroup of the Germani. The Goths may have immigrated from Scandinavia, where there is a region called Jutland. The archaeological evidence exists, but it's not fully clear. A 6th century historian called Jordanus wrote the Getica, which focuses on the origins of the Goths, but its accuracy is disputed. Speaking of all these historical texts, I do full annotated bibliographies for those of us that love the research rabbit holes. You can get those by joining patreon.com/SnappyDragon or just sign up to support the channel and help cover the massive amount of tea I went through doing all this research. World history remembers the Goths first and foremost for wrecking the Roman Empire. Although, to be fair, said Roman Empire had already wrecked itself a fair bit by the time the Goths rolled in. The Goths were essentially split by invasion from the Huns in the 4th century CE. A group of Goths fought a battle against the Roman Empire to cross the Danube. These became known as the Visigoths and traveled further through the Roman Empire's territory, eventually establishing a kingdom in present-day Spain at Toledo. Meanwhile, the Goths in Hun-controlled territory gained independence in the 5th century. Some of these became known as the Ostrogoths, and after a few of them bopped around in the Balkans for a while, they rolled up on the remains of the Western Roman Empire and founded a kingdom in present-day Italy at Ravenna. Side note, it is really interesting to see how the names of these tribes continue to stick in language. The Vandals are another barbaric tribe whose name is now associated with transgressive behavior in modern English. Their name could have come from a mythological ancestor called Arvandil, from the Proto-Germanic word for turned or twisted or wind, or from the Vendel province in Sweden. And now it means to mess with publicly accessible property that is not yours. Heckin' Romans. Imagine what's gonna happen to the name Karen in a couple thousand years. That's unfortunate, but I can see it. Bringing it back to fashion, or at least the decorative arts. We have a small number of examples of Visigothic and Ostrogothic fashion, actually. Most of the extant wearable items we have are jewelry, since textiles have a hard time surviving this many centuries. The designs feature a lot of eagle shapes and mosaic work, and the Visigoths in particular seem to have had quite a bit of goldsmithing that's been preserved. As for clothes, there's an analysis of clothing in mid-6th century Ostrogothic Ravenna by Olga Magola. Last wills, including the bequest of items like clothes from the deceased to their heirs, were made part of the city municipal documents in certain circumstances, like when someone was paid to be the executor. This will is for the minor landholder Calictus, a Roman name, and a freedman in his household called Guderit, an Ostrogothic name. Magola states that it's important not to make too many assumptions about these people's ethnicities based on their names, because of how mixed the cultures were in this setting. Calictus, the upper-class man, left behind the following garments. Linen bracas, which could either be underpants similar to medieval brays, or they might be longer and more like trousers. 2 tunics, a decorated leek-green silk one, and a short-sleeved shot silk one. Shot silk is when you use one color threads for the warp and another for the weft, so the material changes color from different angles. I want you to picture that when I describe the final item. A red and leek-green shot silk and linen under tunic or shirt. This was not even an outer garment, and it was not only brightly colored, but a cross-weave of 2 different bright colors. We have a list of monetary values assigned to every item, and this is easily the most expensive piece of clothing, costing between 2 and 3 times as much as the next most expensive. As for Guderic, the freedman, he left a decorated shirt, an old military or ceremonial cloak, an old traveling cloak, and an old silk tunic with some kind of colored pattern. Could be woven, stamped, dyed, shot, basically anything other than embroidery, because there's a specific term for that, and it wasn't used to describe his tunic. So even this guy Guderic, who was born enslaved and freed during his lifetime, owned a colorful silk tunic. I do want to briefly quibble with the author of this paper though. Many of Guderic's garments are described as old in condition. The author claims that this indicates that they were heirlooms and of particular value to be passed down. However, the color-patterned silk tunic is half the value of Guderic's decorated shirt, the only item of his clothing not described as old. In other bequests of clothing I've read following a similar format, though admittedly from around 1,000 years later, the descriptor old is used as a contrast to best, like listing a woman's two overgowns as her best gown and her old gown. So I think it's more likely that old here doesn't indicate an heirloom, rather it indicates a cast-off, possibly from someone like Calictus to someone freed from slavery but still in his household. Anyways, enough of that. Last thing to note, there's a type of vertical striping called clavy that's frequently depicted in art from this setting, but it's not described on any of these clothes. It could be that the art is allegorical and uses the clavy to indicate social position. It could be clavy were only worn for formal or ceremonial dress and not in daily life. It could be that clavy were made of valuable material and would get removed and put on other clothes. We're not totally sure. But my point is, people in Ostrogothic Ravenna wore some heckin' colorful outfits, including color combinations, like red and leek-green, that modern people would consider painful to the eyes. Oh, and anyone who says that medieval people didn't wear green because it's a more complicated dyeing process can read this bequest and kiss my verdant bustle. They can kiss my verdant bustle. Regarding the Visigoths, we have a similarly interesting source in the form of the Etymologies by Isidore of Seville, a Hispano-Roman cleric and scholar living in Visigoth-ruled Iberia. Around 625 CE, he published this dictionary-like work that describes a number of garments and the origins of their names. He mentions both short and ankle-length tunics, an open tunic called the armelausa that only fastens at the shoulders. Unclear if that would leave it with open sides or how it was also open at the front and back, as Isidore describes. Also, underpants, nightshirts or undertunics, and a number of overgarments for regional style or nationality. An interesting example is the amiculum, a linen mantle that in ancient Rome marked a sex worker or convicted adulteress, but nowadays in Visigothic Spain was a mark of respectability. A bit later on, we have illuminations from the 10th century remnants of the Visigothic kingdom in Spain in the Gerona Beatus, the Codex Aemilianensis, and the Valcavado Beatus. These were created about 2 centuries after most of the Visigothic territory in Iberia fell to the Umayyads, and do contain some influences from Andalusian Islamic culture, both in the art and in the clothing styles themselves. We see a lot of bright colors again, and the most common outfit appears to be one or more tunics, sometimes of different length and contrasting shades, plus a wrapped cloak. This page depicting people doing agricultural work shows similar outfits, but with knee-length tunics and trousers underneath. There's one other medieval style of dress that gets the term Gothic applied to it before the rise of the 20th century incarnations of Goth fashion we're more familiar with. The Gothic fitted dress is a fashion history term for a particular style of dress worn in Western European women's wear in the 14th and earlier 15th centuries, characterized by a closely fitting silhouette that followed the body shape, requiring a buttoned or laced closure. Gothic fitted dress is one of those terms in fashion history that wasn't used at all during the time the clothing was commonly worn, but dress historians needed a name to distinguish it. During the time, it would most likely have been called a kirtle or coat, but there are so many other garments with identical or similar names because, well, think about all the different styles that come to mind when a modern English speaker says dress. The field of fashion history needed a more distinct term, and so dress historian Robin Netherton named this style the Gothic fitted dress. Here's my confusion. I can't figure out why. Not why did this style need a more specific name? That part makes sense, and she explains it in an SCA class handout I read. But what makes this style of dress specifically Gothic? I asked on my Instagram a little while ago, and no one there could tell me either. So you're getting my best guesses, which require me to, once again, engage with a field of study I know comparatively little about. Gothic architecture is a style of building and decoration characteristic of Western Europe in the High and Late Middle Ages. during which time the Gothic fitted dress was worn. It was often used for grand buildings, from castles and cathedrals to town halls and universities. Places intending to impress upon a viewer just how important they and their associated personages were. It's defined by features such as pointed arches, flying buttresses, and the use of rib vaults to allow for tall ceilings and larger windows. What's kind of funny is that Gothic architecture wasn't called that by contemporaries either. The name Gothic was originally an insulting term used by Renaissance and later architects, wanting to differentiate the bad old style from the newer, more classically influenced designs. Contemporaries called what we know as Gothic architecture French or Frankish work, modern, new, or German style. In Lives of the Artists from 1568, Giorgio Vasari and his biases provide a clear-cut example of a pattern I gestured at earlier with the word vandal in modern English. Things associated with classical Roman style are held up as being better, more civilized, and the social ideal, whereas to describe something as Gothic was to associate it with invading, uncultured barbarians, the difficult Dark Ages, and transgressive, socially destructive behavior. I don't get it. The Goths I've met usually have great manners. Oh, we will be coming back to that. It appears that Gothic architecture is how the term Gothic has made the transition from the name of a Germanic tribe to its more recent associations with darkness, eeriness, and drama. Once again, we're hopping over to another field I know less about, but at least I know a little more about literature than architecture. The Gothic novel was a literary genre that developed in the later half of the 18th century and continued to grow through the 19th. It's definitely one of the ancestors of the modern horror genre, characterized by a general aura of fear and hauntedness. Supernatural elements were common, including ghosts, vampires, monsters, and mythological figures. Old Gothic-style buildings were a frequent part of the setting and were used to set the tone, with gloomy castles and churchyards and monasteries helping the setting and its eeriness become an active part of the story. Thus, Gothic architecture lent its name to the genre. The popularity of Gothic novels became part of a greater shift from the very rational social tone of the Enlightenment, another period that idealized the Romans, to the Romantic period, with a greater social interest in big, intense emotional experiences. No, the irony of the name romantic is not lost on me. Gothic literature, like Gothic revival architecture, valued the intensely emotional over rationality, using associations with the Middle Ages and Gothic architecture to evoke a sense of awe and gravitas, as well as spookiness about a dark period of history. This genre also provided space and mechanism for social critique, much in the way that genre media like fantasy and science fiction can today. Many Gothic novels were written by and for women and focused on their interests, eventually broadening the socially acceptable sphere of topics for feminine reading and writing. The villains of female Gothic novels are not necessarily villainous because of a supernatural monstrous nature. Rather, they're more likely to be examples of the power held by men in a patriarchal society, and how that power, including any supernatural power, could be abused. For 18th and 19th century women, I can see how this would offer both an escape into fiction from the problems of the real world, while simultaneously providing critique and validation about those same problems. Why does this sound familiar? Does it have anything to do with the rate you go through audiobooks? My personal reading habits have nothing to do with this video, thank you very much. Gothic literature continued to develop through the 19th century, through short stories like those of Edgar Allan Poe, novels like Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, and crossing over with other varieties of monster stories to create a more direct precursor to the modern horror genre. When cinema began to retell these stories in the early 20th century, the existing imagery of crumbling and haunted Gothic architecture was joined by fashion-related imagery. One of the major contributors to the strong, dark 1920s makeup we call vampy actually came from actresses like Musidora as Irma Vep or Theda Bara in the 1915 silent film A Fool There Was. Her role was simply called The Vampire and helped develop this archetype of femme fatale characters in early cinema, as well as the look associated with it. This imagery continued to develop along with the art form in filmed versions of Gothic literature, such as the 1931 Frankenstein, the 1935 Bride of Frankenstein, the 1940 adaptation of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, and the 1931 and 1958 versions of Dracula. And of course, the utter delight that is the Addams Family in all their incarnations, beginning in the 1930s as a comic and continuing through the 60s all the way to the present. And it's this set of aesthetics, the darkly theatrical, the gloomy, the out of time and historical, that helped define the more modern genres of Gothic rock and the fashion that grew out of it. The term Gothic rock was coined to describe the Doors in 1967, speaking to the more aggressive tone of their music compared to more mainstream rock of their time. I would quote the article called 4 Doors to the Future, Gothic rock is their thing, but it's only available on the Wayback Machine and that's down at time of filming. While their fashion choices are a far cry from what we would call goth, the name was now out there to be applied to other performers with far more outlandish sensibilities, like Alice Cooper, Bauhaus, and Susie and the Banshees. Bauhaus music even made a direct callback to those earliest 20th century horror films, and was featured in a contemporary vampire film in 1983. Performers in this genre often chose stage outfits to coordinate or add to the dark, atmospheric tone of their music, giving birth to the fashion subculture we now call goth. Black clothes, strong dark makeup influenced by the 1920s vamp look, use of historical elements like corsetry and frothy black lace, leather jackets and accessories inspired by the punk scene and leather culture. Fans of the music and the subculture use the performers' stage outfits as inspiration for their own style, from events to daily wear. Another article I unfortunately couldn't access in original form due to the Internet Archive being down speaks to the degree of Susie Sue's influence on fashion at a performance in 1980. About half the girls at Leeds had used Sue as a basis for their appearance from hair to ankle. Since then, Gothic fashion has existed in dialogue with mainstream fashion, drawing on and being drawn on by runway designers like Alexander McQueen, and being made wearable and accessible by creating new versions of existing trends. Corporate goth and dark academia are good examples of Gothic takes on fashions that were originally indicative of very institutional, mainstream, conventional settings. It's also been incorporated into other counterculture fashions. Gothic Lolita fashion is a well-known variant of Lolita style, which began in Japan as a hyper-feminine, playful response to the social pressures placed on women. And even later iterations and related styles have kept a surprising amount in common with Gothic art's historical roots. The emo kids of my youth were far from the first to romanticize tragedy and depression and suffering. I'd say the Victorians were doing it before it was cool, but of course, I think the Victorian version is also pretty cool. It's absolutely amazing to me how a term like this can journey from language and ethnic history through architecture, literature, film, and music to become the name of such a well-known fashion movement. And it retains a surprising amount of the meaning that's been ascribed to it in previous periods. Goth style and subculture still holds the transgressive attitude towards the social conventions and institutions that call back to the wrecking of Romans. It still values the drama and intensity and sense of awe evoked by Gothic architecture. It still delights in the dark and otherworldly atmosphere and inspirations of Gothic novels. Understanding where something comes from and how it came to be what it is always gives me a deeper appreciation for it, especially when that history is nearly 2,000 years long. So every time I break out the black lipstick and trip pants from high school, I can be satisfied knowing I am a transgressive threat to the Roman Empire and all it represents, a validating fantastical allegory used to comment on the ills of the patriarchy, and continuing the aesthetic legacy of groundbreaking performing artists. Happy Halloween, my darling goths, whether you are Gothic all year or only on special occasions. Tell me in the comments about your favorite Gothic outfit, whether it's Ostrogothic levels of colorful or all black all the time. Click the like button to tell YouTube you had fun, and subscribe for more seasonal fashion history sass. If you want the good stuff, by which I mean the source notes, go join the SnappyDragon Patreon. Otherwise, you can find me around the internet at Miss SnappyDragon on Facebook, Instagram, and very occasionally TikTok. Actually, please go find me there and help me out because I still probably haven't decided what I'm dressing up as for Halloween. Seriously? You have a closet full of costumes and you still haven't decided? Look, it's not that easy. Halloween costumes are about dressing up as a character and I've just got a historical clothes. Yeah, you made a video about that. Don't make me pick something for you.